We are back. So listen, the Got Value podcast, if you are not already tapped in, tuned in, I need you to do so because these conversations are not only game changing, but they have been so life affirming for me. So if nobody else is getting anything out of it, I am living my best life listening to these conversations from leaders who not only am I inspired by, but who have done some phenomenal things. And today is no different. Thank you so much for joining me on the Got Value podcast. I am a firm believer that knowing who you are and being confident in whomever that is, it truly does inform your choices. So I start every single interview with, who do you say you are?
Wow, I love how you phrased that. I was thinking I was just going to come on here and introduce myself, and you're like, who do you say who you are? Well, I am a Black woman. I am a Brooklyn girl. I always say Brooklyn girl because, I was born in Brooklyn. And so I started out as a Brooklyn girl. Now I'm a Brooklyn woman, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I'm a curious individual who is really at my core. I like to make sure that we live in a fair and equal and equitable world. And I've always been that way. People thought that I would be a lawyer or something when I was a kid, but I actually grew up to be a journalist, eventually became an entrepreneur. And a lot of folks know me as the founder and CEO of a media company called Her Agenda.
I love it. You said something in there too about being curious. And it's something that I feel like a lot of us, we don't allow ourselves to be. We're like, a kid can be curious, they can explore and discover what lights them on fire, not actual fire, because, children, but like what ignites their spirit and what brings them like immense joy. And as we tend to grow older, we forget that. Like, I don't want anyone else calling me a girl, but I have no problem, saying I am a curious, I'm a curious girl, because it allows me to tap back into that childhood, that zest to like discover. And so when it comes to curiosity, how do you maintain that? Because it's easy to like, lose it. How do you maintain that level of curiosity to
What's interesting listening to what you just shared, for me, it was the opposite, because as a kid, I was not encouraged to be curious. It was called being nosy, and that was something that was not allowed. It was considered rude, being fresh. Why are you asking so many questions? Just listen. This might sound familiar to some folks. And so it wasn't until later on in life that I recognized that nosiness is actually a positive thing, and relabeled it, reapproached my view of it when I learned about curiosity and learned what that word was, what it meant. I'm like, that's me. Yeah. And in hindsight, I eventually became a journalist, and journalists ask questions for a living. And so that's kind of the moment where it really made sense. When I finally discovered that I wanted to pursue journalism, and that was my purpose and my passion, then I recognized, I've always had this within me. And that's how I know that this is really divine. It's really my purpose, because I was born this way. I was born asking questions. And now I get to just do it for a living and just refine it as a skill.
Oh, so then would you say like that was the journey to discovering your purpose? Like, especially me, like I know, and I don't know about anybody else's household, but Black households, it was children are supposed to be seen and not heard back in the day.
Yep, exactly. And so the new age parenting is a little different.
Slot different. Even now, because I have an 11-year-old, and sometimes when we're around older adults, they'll say, she's so fast. And I'm like, actually, she's not in the way that you're saying fast. I'm like, we just allow her to express herself, to ask questions. I want her to ask all the questions, be super clear on what it is that you're stepping into so that you can make an informed decision, right? Exactly. So then would you say that that was like the discovery of your purpose? Like it wasn't necessarily linear, because, our discovery of our purpose isn't always linear, But with you being so curious and wanting to ask all those questions, would you say that that was the discovery of your purpose or helped you to find and define your purpose?
I wouldn't say that in particular. What it was, it actually, it looks like it's very simple on the surface now, but in the moment of discovery, I actually didn't even realize that it was a moment. When I discovered my purpose, I had to get outside encouragement and get pushed into it, really.
Oh,
and then when I actually got into it, I was like, wait a second, this makes sense, and I should have figured this out sooner. But it was I took a journalism class just in high school just to fill up my schedule. I went to a high school that allowed us to take electives. So I took this elective called journalism. I had no idea what that meant, actually. I didn't know what newspapers were. I knew it, that the news came on at 5, but I never thought like, oh, this is a career I could probably do one day. When I thought about choosing a job, I always thought about, okay, there's doctor, there's lawyer, there's author, maybe, because I read a lot as a kid. I would read like a book a day. So that's another thing that connected me to the purpose of journalism, is just that I love words and to read. I taught myself how to read actually when I was 4, before I even started school. That's a whole other story. But I feel all I can say, a lot of the time, the lesson in this, when I really reflected on it, is a lot of what we have within us naturally, we don't recognize as a gift or a skill until someone else kind of comes in and points it out to us. So because I've always, been reading, I've always been good at writing, I've always been curious, I never thought these are skills that can help me to actualize my purpose. I thought like, this is just my personality. This is me. It's not that hard, because it was easy to me and natural. It's just like, I'm not thinking anything of it. So then I took journalism, and the teacher was just sort of blown away, I think, by how easy I was catching on to the structure and the way that I was putting together my stories. And he kept asking me to join the school newspaper. And I was just like, do not have time for that, because I actually am going to Soho after school. I'm trying to get a job. Does this pay? Like typical teenage me, Brooklyn girl, through and through, into fashion, into jeans, sneakers, not really caring to stay after school longer. Because in New York City, you have to be at school at 8 a.m. And by 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I'm ready to be out. But he was asking me and pushing me. So I showed up, and eventually I was just like, wait, this is a career where you get to know things first before everyone else, which is what I love. And you get exclusive access to really all the people that you read about in magazines and newspapers. And you just get to write about it, and you get to have these amazing experiences, in addition to writing a different story every day, basically. And so that's the moment. It was gradual over time, but I had to get pushed from someone on the outside.
Ooh, that was such a juicy, the story alone. And you tapped into so many things, especially the whole, I'm a firm believer that our intrinsic skills, that is what that is our value, right? Because people pay you, just like people pay for skills. That's why I like to call it a value. And I believe like our intrinsic values, that's what those are solutions, right? It's a solution to somebody's problem. People need to be informed. You are excellent at journalism. And so your intrinsic skill is a value that people will pay for. And it allows you to build, and has allowed you to build, a dope career in life that you actually enjoy, And that goes back to remembering that we all are powerful in our own way. And way too many people, they relinquish their power because they think they have none. Even in high school, when your teacher recognized like, nah, you have a gift here, that was one of your superpowers. So how have you, designed your own agenda, like created and have walked your own path in spite of any external pressure to do it this way or have it that way or do it like that?
Well, I'm trying to think of where to even start because I'm just a rebellious person by nature. Again, going back to intrinsic skills and values. If you're into astrology, I'm an Aries, and we like to push back and we are bold in our choices. So for me, I always loved journalism. And the thing that was hard for me though is picking a lane, because I was coming into journalism actually at a really pivotal time when digital was just starting to emerge.
Yeah.
And so the traditional way of doing journalism, there was no digital component. So you really had to pick, are you going to be print? Are you going to be broadcast? Are you going to do newspapers? Are you going to do magazines? There's completely different steps that you have to take for each of those types of careers. Mm-hmm. So I initially was saying to myself, well, if I had to pick, I would maybe pick television. But even in pursuing television, I interned and I worked as a producer at a TV station. They teach you how to do everything. They teach you how to shoot. So I was shooting video. They teach you how to write. So I was writing scripts. They teach you how to produce. So it's producing, and then step in front of the camera. So when it came time for me to actually get a job at the station that I interned at, I actually ended up doing everything, which was a role that they actually made up for me called news associate. So I was like on the assignment desk. I was doing research. I was in the streets field producing. But then when it came to going to the next phase, I had to really pick. Like they were like, do you want to be an assignment editor? Do you want to be a producer? And I was like, actually, I don't want to be any of those things. I want to be on camera. And so for you to do that at that time, you had to actually go to a small town and work your way up that way. And I didn't see that as my path. I was just like, well, there's this thing called the internet now. So why can't I just do some like on camera stuff? But you put it on the internet, you don't put it on TV. They were not ready for that. They were like, what? No, that doesn't make sense.
Like, we don't want it.
So I ended up leaving, and I had already started my own company when I was in college, and decided, I'm going to just freelance and also work on Her Agenda on the side and figure this out, because there's this new media world that's emerged. And I just want to try and figure it out right now, while at the time I was like 21, 22, still living at home with my parents, which to me, I felt was just like the biggest thing, the biggest kind of like burden on me. I felt like almost like a failed adult because I was still living at home. But in hindsight now, I'm 32. I'm just like, that was such a blessing to be able to take a risk and step away from a full-time secure job to experiment and try something, because I didn't have the burden and responsibility of having to pay rent. And just how young I was, even though I felt like I should be out the house by now. But all these shoulds that we put on ourselves actually don't matter in the long run, especially when you're pursuing something that is connected to your purpose that will make the world a better place.
Yeah.
All that doesn't matter.
None of it matters. I consider shoulds, and this is what I say often, should is BS. It's about, do I want to do this?
Yep.
Is this something that aligns with what I believe either my purpose is or what I believe I should be doing right now? Because sometimes there are folks who are unclear of their purpose. So I'm always like, okay, well, what's the next best step? You can't see the stairway. Okay, what's the next best move?
Yeah.
What does that piece look like?
I get that question a lot too, where people say, because whenever I tell my story, because I discovered my purpose so young, I always try to make sure that people understand there's no age limit on discovering your purpose. No. But if you want to start to like get closer to uncovering what it is, it's really just getting still for one thing and reflecting on, what do people come to you for? Like, what is the thing that you're known for in your circle, in your community, that people constantly ask you? And start thinking about that and write it down and try to come up with a list and continue to really just say yes to stuff and put yourself out there, put yourself in new experiences around new people, and it will come to you. Usually someone else might point it out to you, and then everything that you've done up until that point will start to make sense.
Absolutely. It's amazing too what you discover when you start moving. Like, the best way to get across the street is to actually put one foot in front of the other, to start walking in the direction of it. So I love what you were saying, in that you don't have to see the whole plan clearly or have the blueprint where it's a strategic turn left here, build up 4 inches, out 5. But it is a and that's too where being curious really does help. It's a how does this make me feel? Is this something that I could see myself doing? Do I even enjoy it? Versus what a lot of us are doing, which honestly is millennials too. Like, yes, I feel like most millennials, or many millennials, let me not say most, many millennials, we have that rebellious nature. I think our parents loved us so much that they didn't force us to do the things that they had to do. So it did allow for just a little bit more exploration, even if that exploration was only in our minds, right? It allowed us to say, and then with the advent of the internet, it's like, wait, there are more people like me. Let me find my tribe. Let me see what this is. I know it got to be some folks who do the things that I do. But getting past and beyond like our perceived limitations, it does take some work, right? And I'm a firm believer in, if you figure out your why, then your perceived limitations simply become opportunities to get better. So what would you say like is your why? And then how have you used that why to push beyond like what you originally perceived as like a limitation?
Wow. These questions, it's just like I'm in therapy right now.
I'm a coach. I can't help it. Sorry.
No, I love it because you're making me really think and reflect, because I want to make sure I'm giving true responses. So my why really, it sort of evolves, but the root of it is really going back to what I was saying before, is making sure that we live in a fair and equal world. And how can I help to move the needle forward on that? So it really started with women initially, because I was really blessed to come up as a New York City kid. And I was exposed to a lot of opportunities, a lot of experiences. For example, I started interning when I was 16. So I was around a lot of powerful women who were producers, who were hosts of radio shows. I went to a lot of conferences and panels and heard people tell their career stories. So in my mind, women are running the world, like, because that's what I saw. I didn't see anything that told me otherwise. Fast forward, I get to college. I take a women's studies class thinking I'm going to learn all about how women are so great and how they got to these positions of power that they're in. Yes, let's study women. Then I'm in this class and they're telling me that the patriarchy still exists, that there's a gender pay gap, that a majority of the world's leaders are still men. And I'm like, what world is this? This is not my world.
Who live in here?
And I was just so shocked that, one, I didn't know it. And two, like, how can we change this? How can we shift it? And that was just like something that really bothered me. And I was talking about it to a friend. Again, sharing and vocalizing to someone else will help you to sometimes get aligned with where you need to be. And they suggested, actually, well, why don't you create? Because my thought was, if only people could see what I saw when I was, coming up, see those powerful women, so that, one, they could be inspired by them, and two, the world, if they think that a woman can't do something, if you see a woman doing it, then you can't say that anymore. Yeah. And I recognize that, like, the media has the power to do that because they showcase stories, and sometimes people experience communities of people that they are not familiar with through TV, through magazines, and it can shape how they think about that community. Yeah. And I explained this to my friend, and they're like, well, why don't you just make a website and you tell the stories of the women that you know? And I'm like, I don't think anybody would care about that. And he's like, you can call it Her Agenda. That'd be a cool name. But at that time, I already had this motto that everyone sort of knew me for. It was an acronym that I created from my name. So my full name is Rhonesha. I go by Nisha sometimes. And I made it into an acronym of No One Ever Slows Her Agenda. And so people knew me by that. It was pretty like well known. I ended up in a song, a song called Brooklyn Girls, actually.
Hey.
By Charles Hamilton. And so they were like, yeah, call it Her Agenda. That's a cool name. I'm like, all right, if the name is available, I'll try it. I went to GoDaddy, looked up the company name, the URL, and it was available. And I did not think that would be available. Like, Her Agenda is too perfect. I'm like, some agenda company has this. And lo and behold, it was there. So I was like, okay, I guess this is a sign I should just do it and figure it out. And that was the beginning of that. And I'm going to let you, ask your next question. But I would say it started with women, that why that I talked about in terms of creating a more fair and equal world. And then it evolved into, okay, I need to lean more into my Black womanhood. Like, I'm a Black woman first, not just a woman. What can I do to advance and help Black people or Black women specifically? And so now, actually, in addition to Her Agenda, I co-founded a nonprofit organization. It's called the Black-Owned Media Equity and Sustainability Institute. And the mission of that is to advocate for and help independent Black-owned media publishers to get access to more revenue so that they can become sustainable and pay people in their community to tell the quality stories that our community needs to hear.
Listen, I'm getting chills because you said so much in that, especially the piece around it matters who's talking to you. It matters who is telling you, because imagine if you had a friend who was saying, oh, well, you're right, ain't nobody gonna do that. But to have friends and people in your life who they see the value in things that you don't even see, because how perfect is Her Agenda? Like, it's easily recognizable. You hear it and it's like, oh yeah, yes, I do have an agenda. Let me figure out what this is supposed to be. Like, having those friends and who you're surrounded by. My grandfather used to say all the time, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. Who you are around, and not just growing up. That's a real thing now today. As a professional, as a business owner, who you surround yourself with, it helps to determine what you'll go after. It helps to either bolster your confidence or to deflate every part of any ambition that you even think you could possibly have. And so having those really, really and I don't want to say strong, but I want to say having those intentional relationships. How do you ensure that you are, because I'm a firm believer and I curate my friend groups. Like, I believe I have some of the most amazing friends, mentors, and sponsors on this side of heaven, but I've curated them. So how do you curate the folks who you allow to be business besties, which are folks who, you do some good business with, but they're not, they're not connected to the soul piece of who you are necessarily. And then the folks who you allow into that intimate space with you to be, whether it's friends, partners, whatever that looks like. How do you curate that for yourself?
I'm curious how you curate yours. You said you have the best on this side of heaven.
This side of heaven. They're awesome. They are awesome. I honestly, I didn't realize I curated them, honestly, until last year. But I always gravitate to people who are kind. I grew up in a very interesting, with a very interesting experience in that the adults who I was around, they were not very kind to us. We were the poor kids. We didn't smell very good. My mother had some mental challenges after losing a child. So we didn't have most of the things. And she also bartered cleaning services so that we could be private school educated. And unfortunately, when you grow up in that type of a dichotomous situation, where you're living in one way, but you have an experience that's the polar opposite, it was very trying. And so I always said that I wanted to be around people who were kind at their core. I didn't care what you necessarily did, but that you were kind, number one, and that you had some sort of an idea of the impact you wanted to make. Because when you couple those two things together, you get an unstoppable human.
Yeah. Wow.
And so what I do is when I'm curating like who I want in my life and to be around me and to pour into me, I look first for kindness. So if I say someone's kind, that is a really big compliment from me, because that is what I look for in humans. Are you kind? Because if you were kind, I won't have to watch my back around you, because I'm super open. I'm a giver. So I won't have to watch my back around you, because I know that there's no malice that you're going to try and either take or hurt or harm, because you lead with the same kindness that I lead with. And then if you're clear on the impact that you want to make, you're going to absolutely get it, because folks who are focused on impact, they're results oriented, which is my type A personality coming out. So that's how I curate my folks. Are you kind, and are you clear on the impact that you want to make? I don't care if you know the how. Who cares about the how? We'll all figure that one out. But do you know the what? So that's how I curate my folks. What about you?
I will say, because I never really reflected on it in the way that you just said, but I am thinking about it now and listening to what you just shared. I'm really drawn to people that embrace their light and understand that they have a purpose bigger than themselves. And those are the people that I really constantly find in my circles, in the rooms that I'm in. My boyfriend is that way. I'm in a 5-year relationship. We've been together for 5 years, but I've known him for longer than that.
Yeah.
And I just really love people that really have something bigger than themselves. It's something about them that is very just a powerful energy, because it's almost like divine, that they've tapped into something that's a greater good or a greater need, and they're filling it and stepping into it, because it can be scary and it can be tough. And so to be around people that I think have that experience, it normalizes it and helps me to continue to push forward.
That is, and I haven't heard anything more truer than what you just said, in that people who do understand that it's not just about you. Like if the vision for your life and the goal for your life, if it's only focused on you and what you'll get and what you'll grow, you're missing out on the broader part of that, where you've tapped into something that's kind of next level, that's, without going like too, esoteric, but it's like a spiritual type of experience, because they understand that, yes, I am this unique, different being, but what I'm doing is building and providing for the greater experience of so many other folks. That is magnetic. Like it's magnetic. And when you do, or when you are in the presence or in personal relationships with folks who have that type of vision, there's some things that come with it, from frustrations to mental exhaustion. So how do you deal with, building your own vision that's bigger than who you are? How do you deal with the frustration and, like I said, that mental type of tug and war that comes when you are experiencing or building something that's tied in with like real growth? Because real growth, it kind of hurts sometimes. Growing teeth as a baby, it hurts. It hurts.
Yep.
How do you do that though?
I will say it's not me that does it. I am a very spiritual person. I believe in God, and I believe it's God that pulls me through it, because somehow whenever I'm in a funk or I feel like I cannot continue to do this, something will happen. Like I'll get an email, I'll get a message from someone, I'll get an opportunity, a deal will come through that I never thought would come through. Just many things have come through that seem out of the blue that I'm like, wow, this could not have come at a better time. And I have no control over that. So that's one way that I do it. And another is, again, leaning on my community and sort of not even talking to them directly, just seeing them out in the world doing what they have to do. And then being able to have dinner with them or go have drinks and really talk about the tea behind the highlight reel and understand like, wow, like that didn't come through as beautiful and seamlessly as it seemed like it was. And gratefully, you know, I built Her Agenda as a solo founder, but with my new venture, I'm lucky to have a co-founder, and his name is Davon Johnson. He's the founder of Blue Life magazine, and I've known him for a long time, but I wouldn't have been able to start a whole new venture, I'm sure, as a solo founder. Like I always said, whenever I do my next thing, I'm going to have a partner to build it with. And so I'm grateful to have him to lean on as well.
Absolutely. It's funny. So I own technically 4 different businesses. There is only one of those businesses that I do alone. The others, I have to have partners because there is no way I would be able to manage honestly, the stress that comes with building a business unless I had folks who I could lean on, who I could, hey, this is hard. Like, is giving up an option that I can, like, is there a button like the I quit button? Can I press that one today? Without having, those folks. And you said, that building or in your next venture, which is what you're doing now, you knew you wanted to have another person to help to build it. But then because you are a solo founder with Her Agenda, like how has the vision for the organization changed, if it has, and how has it grown like since you founded it?
Which organization? Her Agenda?
Her Agenda, yeah, Her Agenda.
How has it changed?
If it's changed.
If it's changed. You know what's funny is it has evolved a lot, but it's just evolved closer to the original vision I've had for it. Because as the years have passed, I've gotten access to more resources and I'm able to finally do the things that I actually envisioned when I first started it. I started the company at 19, and this is in 2008. So this is really early days of digital. Like most websites that exist today were not even thought about. Like, and I was saying as a 19-year-old, I want to start a digital media company. People didn't know what that was. They're like, oh, you're starting a blog. And I was so irked every time someone said, you starting a blog? I'm like, I have a blog, because I did have a blog at the time. I used to blog my daily life before Twitter, before Instagram. It was a blog called societyandstyle.com. Well, it was societyandstyle.blogspot.com. And then when they allowed you to buy your own URL and connect it to the page, I bought the URL, and I still own that URL actually, which I'm surprised no one has offered me money for it, because that's a good URL.
It is.
And so I had a blog, so I knew what a blog was, but people didn't know what the internet was. And I'm just like, it's not a blog, it's a company. It's like a magazine, but online. And people are like, okay, a blog. And I'm like, no, it's not a blog. So now, though, people understand what a digital media company is. So that's one part of that, one part a little easier.
Yeah.
I always wanted to make sure that we published content every day, that we had a database of events and resources that constantly evolved, that had thousands of listings. I wanted to make sure we had a resources section, all these things, and we finally have that. Yeah. And we're actually about to relaunch it again with some new features and new ways to serve our audience in better ways. And so it's evolved, but it's getting now just closer and closer to that big vision that I have, that one, I didn't have the vocabulary to fully articulate at the time because the language was new and didn't really exist yet. And that world was being built still. And two, I had no funding. I basically self-funded it. I had used my savings for my first job because my rule was for myself internally was I didn't want to ask my parents for anything. If I couldn't make it work with the money that I had, then to me, that was a sign that I needed to go back into corporate America and maybe try it again later. But luckily I didn't have to do that. And it's just continued to grow and evolve ever since. But yeah, I had saved $25,000 for my first job. My friends would make fun of me because I had a pretty good paying job, but I still acted like I wasn't making any money. Like they'd be like, oh, let's go to brunch. And I'm like, we just went to brunch like a couple days ago. So, and I was that friend that was like, well, I only had the French toast. I didn't have any mimosas. Like, cause I was just like thinking, okay, I'm in this job now. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I know that I eventually want to have autonomy to do something that might not pay right away. So let me just stack this money up.
I feel like that is super, super smart. It's looking at, okay, what do I have now? Where is it I'm trying to go? And then how can I prepare what I have now to be able to sustain me for what I want later? I feel like that is communicating not only to yourself, but that's communicating to the universe. Like, hey, I'm already preparing for what I say I have.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some real power in operating as if it's already yours.
I should have had you as a friend back then with all this positive affirmation, because my friends back then, like, they just called me cheap. They were like, you're so cheap. Why are you so cheap?
Listen, you were not cheap. You were just understanding I'm headed somewhere. You don't have to understand. I tell people all the time, folks who don't or can't see the vision that you have for your life will never understand the actions and the activities and the things that either you will do or won't do because they don't see that vision. My mother was the same way when I said, I'm going to sell my house and move to New York. She was like, are you serious right now? She's like, you have a child. You are being selfish. And I was like, I appreciate your point of view. I do. But this is a decision that I am making because I understand what I am building. If I was able to do, the things that I had done in Miami, like I said, my first client when I started my marketing firm that's now closed, my first client was Grey Goose executing an event for them with Miami Swim Week, BET. Like those were like the clients who I was working with. I'm like, Mommy, you don't understand. If I can do this in Miami with no database, no real anything, can you imagine what I can do in New York? The song says, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. So I got to go to see if I can make it. I need to see if I can do this. So I don't consider it being cheap. And even now, like I'll have friends who'll say, well, I can't go to this because I'm doing something else. And I'm like, oh yes. How can I support? Like, what does that look like? I feel like we would all be in a much better place if we understood delaying your gratification is okay.
Ooh. And I'll add to that, being selfish is okay too.
Yes.
Say, oh, you're being selfish, like that's negative. Okay, yes, I'm being selfish. Right now, my intention always, I had a lot of being selfish when I was in my 20s, but I knew that eventually my life would have to be selfless because I would be probably responsible for family members or I would be responsible for children. So I wanted to make sure I had my selfish phase early to lay the foundation so that I later on could focus on others without feeling like I was missing out on something.
Oh, I always, when people are like, oh, you're being selfish, I'm like, I'm filling my cup. You are not going to put your negative, view of what being selfish is. No, I'm filling my cup so that when I am ready to pour, that I'm pouring and giving out of my excess and not that I'm giving you out of my reserves.
Exactly.
because, you know, most people have a reserve. Like for me, I understand I'm not the friend who has a whole lot of energy. So I can't go out and be all night with you all night because I'm going to be out for the count for the next 3 days.
Yeah.
I'm not the friend with a whole lot of energy. I'm the friend who, ooh, it's 11. Y'all not sleepy? Y'all not tired? Y'all want some tea to
Were you always that way, even when you were in your 20s?
Oh, heavens no, girl. I had a party for every night of the week. I had a party. I used to party the way I went to church because I feel like I grew up in a borderline cult in that we were in church all the time. Like I was never allowed to go to any dances. I was never allowed to go to any football or sports games or anything like that. I could go to church. I could wear skirts and I could listen to the Lord's music. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. And so when I got to college, I did just all the opposites. And so I had a party for every night. And then I would wake up and go to church on Sunday because I'm like, you know, I still got to get a little church in after this good party. And so I had a whole lot of energy then. And now, because I'm building so much and I'm investing so much energy into all the things, I'm like, okay, I don't have as much of a reserve for this. So I never consider people being selfish unless there's malice behind it. Now, if there's malice, then okay, let's have a different conversation. But you honoring what you need, what works for you, self-preservation is a thing. And I would much rather you give to me out of your excess or out of your abundance than you ever give to me out of your reserve. Because eventually you're going to be pissed at me because you're going to feel like I'm taking the essence of who you are. And that's never a good place to be in, you know?
Preach. Pass the plate around. You just gave a sermon talking about church.
Listen, I curse too much for church. They'll put me out. They're like, God is not in that, and that's okay. But no. So just my last question, because I'm a firm believer, and I always want to leave folks, especially in with this particular podcast, is I always want to leave folks with something like that they can take and they can utilize and implement in their daily lives. And so it's, what do you believe is either the best piece of career or life advice, you know, that you've received or that you've given that has helped to change things for you?
This is very easy. It's advice that my very first mentor, Ty Beauchamp is her name.
I love her.
She is incredible. She met me when I was 16. She was like 26 at the time. In my mind, I thought that was a grown woman. Now I'm realizing she was a kid too.
She was a baby.
She literally, I met her at a luncheon. It was a graduation ceremony for the New York Association of Black Journalists. They had a high school journalism workshop, so I participated in that. It was the graduation, and they invited some editors and people from the industry. And she saw me, and she watched me because they had a little TV news segment that we did, and so I was one of the anchors. You know, wanted to be on TV. Let me do the anchor role. And she just, I don't know what it was, what prompted her to say this, but it stuck with me. And it was kind of the first time someone really affirmed that there's something going on that I really can't articulate, but I know there's some big stuff that's waiting for me as I step into this world. So she just literally held me and was just like, you are equipped. And I was just at the time, I was like, what do you mean? How does she know? What's going on? So I will pass that message to anyone watching, anyone listening. You are equipped. You have it within you. Whatever it is that you're meant to do in this world, you have it. You have what you need. And so know that and recognize that and feel that so that you can then take the next step.
That's it. Telling someone that you are equipped, even if they don't understand it, you can feel that one. That one you feel, because it's like, wait, you mean I already have it? Yeah, you just got to tap into it. Oh, this was so good. I must tell you, thank you. Where can we stay connected, follow you, all the things? Where can we do that?
Okay, so you can follow my personal page. It's the same name across Twitter, Instagram. It's at Nesha's Agenda, NESHAS Agenda. And of course, follow and support at Her Agenda on Instagram and Twitter as well. And really and truly would love if you just went to heragenda.com. Maybe type your email in a little email box so we can keep in touch, and I can let you know when we have upcoming events, panels, conferences, resources to share. That's really like the key. Like if you don't follow me on social media, just give me your email.
Amen. It is gold.
Yes.
Thank you. Of course, anyone who's listening, you already know you can stay connected with me everywhere at Alechia Reese. And y'all should know my mother was very excited when she was spelling my name. She knew I'd be unique. So Alechia Reese, Reese. And stay connected. Tap into rglpgroup.com. We provide so many resources for folks to grow and to connect their value and their purpose to the work that they do, because there is true value in purpose. And I am, again, so grateful for you for joining us today. This conversation was truly life affirming. So I thank you for sharing bits and pieces and parts of creating your own agenda.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Got Value podcast. Remember, there is true value in purpose, and the greatest discovery of your life will be exactly what yours is. Stay connected with us at gotvaluenation.com.